Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We've got a really fascinating one for you today. We are going to be unpacking the theology and honestly the incredibly practical, everyday advice from a recent MVMNT church teaching on the book of Ephesians. We're going to be digging into ancient history, diving through biblical texts, and tackling one of the single biggest, most stubborn problems of the human experience: division. Okay, let's jump right in.
Right out of the gate, I want to pose a question directly to you. Think about your life, your community, maybe your workplace or church. What unseen walls exist there? Seriously, take a second. What dividing lines are so deeply ingrained, so normalized that we've literally just stopped noticing them? This is the core issue we're tackling today. Division is just everywhere, right? We kind of accept it as the default human setting. But as we're going to see, the source text actually offers a totally radical alternative.
All right, let's start with Section 1, the roots of division.
Okay, so to figure out how to fix division, we kind of have to know where it started, right? And the teaching draws this absolutely brilliant contrast here. It takes us way back to Genesis chapter 11, the Tower of Babel. At this point, humanity is totally united, but they're united in pure pride. They're trying to build this massive tower to the heavens to make a name for themselves, completely leaving God out of the equation. So because of this dangerous, self-reliant trajectory, God actually steps in and orchestrates division. He confuses their languages and they scatter. Fast forward a couple thousand years to the book of Acts, to the day of Pentecost. The Holy Spirit descends, and suddenly 120 followers are speaking in all these different languages. But this time, it's not to confuse them. It's so that folks from Mesopotamia all the way to Egypt can understand the exact same message. It's this total beautiful reversal. The division at Babel is literally completely undone by the uniting power of the Spirit at Pentecost.
Moving right along to Section 2, the wall of hostility.
Let's fast forward into the first century, because we need to see how this historical division physically showed up in the early church's world. Think about the number 4. We're talking 4 feet. That's the exact height of a literal, physical stone wall inside the first century temple in Jerusalem. It sat right there in the outer gates, and it strictly separated Jewish people from Gentiles. This wasn't just some polite suggestion or cultural habit. It was a hard, immovable boundary forcefully drawn between us and them. Think about how absurdly small a 4-foot wall is, yet it was an utterly impenetrable barrier.
And I mean, talk about high stakes. Just look at this warning. Any Gentile crossing that little 4-foot boundary was subject to the death penalty. They literally had signs posted along this wall in Latin and Greek, making the threat crystal clear. But here's the really fascinating part, the crucial context. The people who built that wall, they didn't think they were being mean or exclusionary. Actually, in their minds, they were being intensely holy. They genuinely believed that an outsider couldn't survive the raw presence of God, so they permanently alienated people, totally convinced they were just protecting religious purity.
Which brings us to Section 3, creating a new humanity.
So how on earth do you deal with a divide that deep? A divide with literal death penalty warning signs? Well, Ephesians chapter 2 tells us that Christ's sacrifice completely demolished that dividing wall in his own flesh, creating what it calls a new humanity. And there's a huge theological distinction we need to make here. This new humanity, it isn't just God throwing Jews and Gentiles into a blender and saying, okay guys, you're on the same team now, meet in the middle. No, it means neither side just awkwardly assimilates into the other. Instead, both groups surrender to something genuinely entirely new. It is a completely new third creation shaped by the Spirit. Something that literally did not exist before. Now, you might be thinking, wow, a diverse, multi-ethnic gathering? That must have been a brand new invention for the early church. Actually, scratch that. If you trace the biblical timeline, there is a clear precedent for this mixed unity right from the jump. Take Abraham, for instance. Outsiders saw how he lived and just joined his clan. Or look at the Exodus out of Egypt. The Israelites didn't leave by themselves. They left with this massive mixed multitude of other slaves who just joined them on their walk to freedom. Even Caleb, one of the most famous, faithful heroes in Israel's history, he had Kenizzite origins. He wasn't even a pure Israelite by birth. The point here is that a diverse, mixed group coming together is totally woven into the narrative from day one.
Okay, so what's the entry fee? How do you actually enter into this new, unified humanity? The text says it's available to anyone who believes. And how much faith does that take? Just a mustard seed. I love this visual metaphor. If you go to the grocery store, grab a jar of mustard seeds and really look at one. It is incredibly tiny. We're talking the size of 2 ballpoint pen tips squished together. You don't need this massive, boulder-sized mountain of spiritual faith to get this unity. You literally just need that tiny, single seed of trust to step into the community.
Let's pivot a bit to Section 4, 4 Tools for Unity. Because now we are moving from high-level theology straight into the nitty-gritty, everyday application in Ephesians chapter 4. And this point right here is absolutely crucial. Creating unity versus maintaining unity. Ephesians tells believers to make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit. Notice it does not say create the unity. The Holy Spirit already did the heavy lifting of bringing everyone together. Our job, our daily, ongoing, and sometimes totally exhausting job, is simply to eagerly maintain what's already been built. Honestly, think about how freeing that is. You don't have to magically manufacture peace out of thin air. You just have to faithfully protect the peace you've already been given.
So, how exactly do we protect it? Well, the text hands us 4 super actionable tools. Be completely humble, be gentle, be patient, and bear with one another. Look, unity isn't magic. It's built on about 10,000 small, deliberate, sometimes really annoying choices. People in your community are going to ruffle your feathers, they're going to react poorly, they're going to have annoying habits, and they're absolutely going to step on your toes. In those everyday, frustrating moments, you have to actively reach for these 4 tools to keep that bond of peace intact.
And honestly, here's a truth bomb that applies to pretty much any organization or community in the world. What actually breaks unity? It is almost never some massive fundamental theological debate. No, everyday division usually comes down to preference, personality clashes, unresolved offenses, and just the quiet, toxic accumulation of small resentments. We stuff our frustrations down, we hold things in, and eventually, that unspoken friction just shatters the community from the inside out.
To show what it looks like to stop that quiet fracturing, the teaching shared this highly relatable story. At a men's breakfast, the pastor accidentally stepped on a congregant's toes. The congregant was supposed to lead the closing prayer, but the pastor accidentally jumped in and completely took over the moment. Now, instead of letting that slight turn into a quiet resentment that boils over for months, the congregant actually called the pastor later that day, super respectfully, to bring it up. The pastor realized his mistake, apologized immediately, and repented. That right there, that is exactly what practically bearing with one another looks like. It's choosing the right time to have a humble, gentle conversation to clear the air before the resentment even has a chance to take root.
And finally, Section 5, a witness to the world. So why does all this internal maintenance matter to anyone outside the walls of the church? Well, it sets up a pretty stark contrast. The secular world definitely knows how to unite, but it usually does it by dividing. Think about it. People unite based on demographics, red versus blue politics, upper class versus lower class, geography, or even generational lines, boomers versus Gen Z. But the church's mandate is radically different. It is explicitly called to unite across all human differences. When people of totally different backgrounds, races, and politics genuinely come together in love, well, it becomes the single most powerful message the outside world will ever see, mostly because they just cannot explain it.
There's this fantastic quote from a church planted conference that just hits the nail on the head. Community is the unity of common people. This kind of profound peace, it doesn't require you to have massive wealth, political power, or some special VIP status. You don't need a polished background. It's literally just common people holding on to the exact same belief and actively choosing to love and bear with each other every single day.
Which really leaves us with one massive provocative question. Look, everyone loves the idea of unity when it's abstract and easy, right? But the real question is, are you actively, eagerly maintaining unity with the specific people in your life who are the absolute hardest for you to love? Thanks so much for joining me for today's Explainer. I really hope this journey gave you a totally fresh perspective on what it truly means to be united.
See you next time.